to say about the verdict?
Well, it was a people's victory, though, brother. And this is very important to keep in mind that it was the people both in the street. It was the sharp lawyers, Brother Ben. Brother Ben's a living legend. His brother Keith, strong, brought his team together. But at the center of it was a black love. It was the Floyd family. And what I mean by that is what you said about Philonis is so true, and what you said about his siblings, that they set the tone, they set the atmosphere, and it was their grace, it was their nobility, it was their integrity, it was their willingness not to engage in hatred and contempt that set the whole atmosphere. That's the legacy of Larcenia Jones Floyd, who we were talking before, coming right out of the rich third ward, rich in spirit, the third ward, the so-called ghetto hood in Houston. And that kind of black love shaped their souls in such a way that they could be determined and to stand with the dignity that they had in order to say, we are going to fight in a principled way. And they then embraced and lured so many of all different colors to say, get on this love train, get on this justice train. We gonna make sure that this policeman who committed a public lynching goes to jail. Now keep in mind now, brother, it's a very low expectation. You know what I mean? If the world sees a public lynching and they decide that is wrong and they send a policeman to jail, that's 1 + 1 = 2. That's just basic. But for so long, 1 + 1 = 0 when it comes to the criminal justice system for black people. So our expectation is so low that we do celebrate tears of joy. But if we don't have the same determination, the same dignity, the same grace, the same willingness to serve and sacrifice that we see in the Floyd family for each and every case, this is just the first of thousands of convictions that need to take place. This is the peak of an iceberg, my brother. You know it, and I know it.
Professor, I've heard people say, well, I don't understand what all the celebration was about and the press conference and everybody talking and speaking. You're speaking to that now.
Absolutely.
Go on.
Absolutely. Because, for example, if it were on the vanilla side of town and they lived in a black supremacist world and white folk had been enslaved for 244 years and lynched every 2.5 days for 50 years and were snatched out of their cars and shot down, when in fact there was a victory in a black supremacist system, the white folk would celebrate. And rightly so, because we're talking about morality and spirituality. Well, we live in a white supremacist civilization that continues to be chronic and systemic and refuses to treat us as human beings. And when we get treated by human beings by criminal justice system, we celebrate for a moment because we got to refortify. Because this is a system, the fundamental question is, and this is a question for Brother Biden, because this is very important. See, Biden himself, remember now, November 18, 1994, he's the one talking about predators. He's the one talking about they're beyond rehabilitation. He's the one talking about throw them in jail and throw away the key. But that cheapens black life. That's 1994. He's talking about brothers who look like me, like you, and like Brother George. You say, oh, Biden, I said you changed. I believe people change. I'm a Christian now. Everybody got a capacity to change. LBJ changed from white supremacists out of Jim Crow, Texas, to a force against white supremacy. Let's see the degree to which Biden has actually changed. He was cheapening black life in 1994 when he bragged about being the architect of the mass incarceration regime to win the election. He's changed now. Beautiful. Let's see if he executes on the ground. Don't leave it to Congress. You got to use your bullet pulpit the way you used it wonderfully today, the way Sister Harris used it wonderfully today. Can't just be pretty words, though.
Well, that's
because if this system is beyond reform, if it's incapable of reform, then this is just an isolated moment of joy, and we're right back to business as usual, and the politicians are right back tied to Wall Street, Pentagon, drones, and turning their back to the suffering of poor black people and poor people around the country. That's the challenge that we're talking about, my brother.
I'm not trying to cut you off. I just wanted to play what they said today. What the president and the vice president said. No. I wanted to play to fortify what you're saying. What the president and the vice president said today, because that's what you were talking about, and then let you finish on the other side. Here it is. Let's play it.
The murder of George Floyd launched a summer of protest we hadn't seen since the civil rights era in the 60s. Protests that unified people of every race and generation in peace and with purpose to say enough, enough, enough of this senseless killings. Today's verdict is a step forward.
So there you go. We don't have the vice president in that. Pardon me for that. But a step forward. But is it always going to take a video to get justice, Professor?
Well, we thank God for Darnell. She's one of the people, crucial people. She made this case what it was. Without her, it would be just another precious, beautiful black man publicly lynched. And you read the police report. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine that police report? Mm-hmm. Deodorized, sanitized, sterilized, lying about a precious child of God, Brother George. Thank God Darnella was there. And so we have to keep the pressure on Brother Biden and Sister Harris. Sister Harris's words were quite strong today as well. She said that racism is a problem, and it's more than a problem. It's a catastrophe. We should not confuse the catastrophic with the problematic. We don't have a race problem. We got a catastrophe visited on black people. A catastrophe visited on indigenous people. A catastrophe visited on brown and Asian. And the question is, how do we fortify ourselves? That's where the love comes in. That's where the joy comes in. Because never forget, Don, any justice that's only justice soon degenerates into something less than justice. You got to have deep love, deep care, deep concern, and you got to have deep joy to sustain you in struggle, or you end up a sprinter rather than a long distance runner in the struggle for truth and justice. This is what we understand from our tradition of black people. And that's why the music is so important. That's why the spirit is so important. And then the intellect, the vision, the courage, and the willingness to sacrifice and serve the least of these. So we do want to celebrate, and we want to salute the nobility of the Floyd family as we move now to the Wright family, the Taylor family, Breonna, and all of us coming together across race and across national boundaries. This is an international issue. And you know, Brother Prince got a new album coming out, brother, called Welcome to America. I was listening to it yesterday. He said his response to Curtis Mayfield. He and I were talking. I said, Prince, I don't really think you're deep as Curtis Mayfield. He said, I think I am. I'm going to go in the studio and show you. And he came out of the studio, Welcome to America, about Minneapolis, the greatest genius coming out of Minneapolis, greatest genius of his generation. And he's part and parcel, his spirit, Larsenia's spirit, Nina Simone's spirit, John Coltrane's spirit, all of it's here. Because that's the legacy of a great people that's trying to hold up a bloodstained banner in a white supremacist civilization that don't want to treat us the way we ought to be treated.
Tonight, Professor. Thank you. Listen, you talked about the humanity of everyone involved. There's certainly the Floyd family, and for the people who took the video and stood by. And here's what Keith Ellison said. I'm going to let you go, but here's what he said. They stopped and they raised their voices, and they even challenged authority because they saw his humanity. They stopped and they raised their voices because they knew what they were seeing was wrong. Professor, thank you. Good night. Good evening to you.
Thank you so much, my brother.
Absolutely. George Floyd finally getting justice. But the other black families who have lost loved ones to police killings are still waiting for justice of their own, as the professor just mentioned.